All right. How are you guys doing? Feeling good? Feeling inspired? For our closing keynote, we're going to hear from another amazing speaker and leader, Maria Blow, President and COO at the Skoll Foundation. Marla is an incredible business leader and has deep experience in economic inclusion after years as a corporate executive, a federal regulator, an entrepreneur, and an angel investor. Throughout Marlo's career, she has been an unwavering and committed person and purpose-driven leader in both the private and public sectors. Let's hear what she has to say about how philanthropy can play a role in building a more equitable and just world for us all.
All right, musical accompaniment, I like it. So good afternoon. It is such a pleasure to be here with all of you, and I got to sit in and listen to a little bit of what was said, hear some of the panels, see some people I know, and get to absorb a little bit of the arena, a little bit of the ecosystem that's present here today. So bravo to all of you for what you've been able to do, for what you've pulled together. Absolutely, absolutely. I think one of the things that's really exciting for me, why I love participating in Halcyon and being a part of Halcyon's efforts, is that in addition to leading all of our grant making and all of the work that gets done at the Skoll Foundation, what got me there is a 25-year career in financial services. And during that time, I spent about 5 or 6 years as an entrepreneur. So being here, I feel like I'm talking to my people, right? People who've been through it, people who've been in the trenches, people who have had to roll up their sleeves and power through and make something happen in the face of overwhelming odds. And I once that gets in your blood, right? Once you're an entrepreneur, my view is sort of always an entrepreneur, right? You've had sort of the ups, the downs, the bumps, the bruises, right? Everything that comes along with that experience. And so I just want to talk a little bit about what that means, right? About why that led me to philanthropy and how I leverage the tools of philanthropy to drive change, right? To drive the change the experience for entrepreneurs and how philanthropy can play a role in changing that. So I will just say that in 2014, right, I started a credit card company of my own. That's after spending time in large corporate. I spent some time as a regulator. I've looked at financial services and financial products from a variety of angles and observed a gap in the market and decided that I would go and fill that gap. So this is a bad idea, right? Like there are gigantic incumbents in this space, right? There's a reason why credit cards come from large banks. It's an extremely capital intensive business. It takes a ton of infrastructure to make that exist. And you have to think back, right? Some of you, I don't know, might have still been in high school in 2014, right? So this is before things like Carta and seed stage capital angel investor groups being really widespread. And there's a huge ecosystem that exists now that entrepreneurs can avail themselves of that did not exist at the time. So again, this was not something that I would recommend. And like all good entrepreneurs, in I went, right, to go and launch my credit card company focused on offering traditional credit to underserved people, right? People who'd been outside of the financial mainstream for a variety of reasons, right? Either they're using payday loans, pawn shops, auto title, right? This whole swath of really difficult products that's out there. And I just couldn't look away from that, right? I care about that issue. I care about the people that are relegated to using those products and wanted to create just a fair chance, right? Just an opportunity for that customer to get back into the financial mainstream and generate a reasonable, profitable, sustainable business for myself and for our investors. So I went about, and actually I should add for entrepreneurs that are thinking about your own journeys, I had one major advantage, and it's a big one, which is I had someone who was willing to do this with me. He became the board chair, and he wrote me the first $300,000 check. So that is a huge plus. And for people that have gone out there to try to raise the first dollar, right? That is a non-trivial speed bump. So I recognize that was a huge plus, and it got me to leave, an otherwise perfectly normal job, right? To go off and take this on. And so for me, I'm going to skip ahead in the story, right? And just say that, I built the organization. We issued credit cards. We built up a $50 million business. I raised $150 million of capital, right? Like there's a whole bunch of things that went into that. I'll just pretend like that went up and to the right. And anybody that's an entrepreneur knows that there's no such thing as up and to the right, right? So this was a roller coaster. There were plenty of ups and downs. There were multiple near deaths. There was a stop and restart. There was a problematic capital provider, right? There's everything you can think of, right? I made every mistake and had every experience that new CEOs have, right? I kept problematic but brilliant employees around too long, and they will destroy your company. I had no independent directors on my board. So everybody on my board was an investor. So they're thinking about their capital, right? Not thinking about the business. Or I should say, they're thinking about their capital and the business, ideally. I'll leave it to you to decide which way you think that tipped. But I think ultimately, I had capital that was not a match for what I wanted to do, right? I'm thinking about building a business that has a mission that generates a fair return, and I am partnered up with capital that is maximizing its return to the exclusion of all else. And what that meant is we had a constant tug of war, right? It was friendly-ish, and we were all ultimately on the same team. But we were actually trying to accomplish two very different things. And that tension was palpable throughout this journey. At every turn, there's an opportunity to raise fees. There's an opportunity to raise interest rates. There's an opportunity to lower the credit availability. There's an opportunity to reduce the quality of the customer service, right? All of those things drop to the bottom line. But my whole point is to treat this customer with dignity, right? That does not need to come at the expense of the humanity of the people that we're trying to serve. So my constant battle with these capital providers was overwhelmingly, for me, the takeaway of my entrepreneurial journey, right? I sold the company 6 years later in 2019, and I took stock, right, of ultimately, what did I learn, right? And where did I want to apply myself after this experience? And for me, it really was this sense that something has to change about that system, right? That I had been in this system, like I said, as an executive, as a regulator, right? I'd actually worked in the federal government and regulated this arena. I had now been an entrepreneur, and I just realized that there's a bigger, broader system at work. And so in the role I'm in now at the Skoll Foundation, I bring my perspective of having been in financial services to the space and the field of philanthropy. And I'm paradoxically, I suppose, in philanthropy in the interest of changing the capital markets, right? And for people who are in or accustomed to interacting with philanthropy, they don't describe themselves as capital markets actors. But people who raise capital are acutely aware of the fact that foundations are very much part of the capital markets, and that they are out raising money from all of these endowments, right? There's $850 billion sitting in the endowments of foundations across this country. And the opportunity, to my mind, is to activate and engage the endowment in the alongside and in the exact same way that we are engaging and making grants. Thank you. And shifting this sector, right, and getting more of that capital into places where it can make a difference is the most important opportunity to enable all the entrepreneurs at Halcyon and places like Halcyon all across this country, and we operate globally, so frankly, I'll say globally, is for organizations like ours to take this responsibility seriously, right? So I'll talk a little bit about what that means and how I do that. So I'm responsible for overseeing all of our grant making, the delivery and execution of our strategy, all of what it takes to deliver a world of peace and prosperity for all, right? And that's the purpose and mission of the Skoll Foundation. I also, and I think I'm perhaps the only person in philanthropy where I also lead, and in partnership with our asset manager, the investing of our endowment, right? So we have a $1.7 billion endowment. We are limited partners in a whole host of funds all over this country. And what you all either know already as entrepreneurs or will soon find out is that general partners, the people who you are pitching to, are very responsive to what their limited partners ask of them. And that as a limited partner, I and we have an opportunity to ask a different set of questions. What are these companies what are the metrics that you're using to evaluate the performance and the impact of the companies in these portfolios? What are the demographics of the organizations that we have hired to manage money on our behalf? When I ask that question, and this is a real example, I generally get sort of the deer in headlights, right? And the answer is like, I don't know, right? And my response to that is, well, how do you think you might find out, right? You should go ask. And then there's the dawning slowly that I'm not planning on going anywhere, right? So you're not going to wait me out and just say that this question is going to go away, right? This is not a sort of initiative du jour, right? This, for me, is about changing the way we operate permanently, right? This is about changing the benchmarks and the parameters that are keeping people out, right? That keep the check writing and the empowerment and the decision making in the hands of the same people and shifting that paradigm. And that starts with us looking at both sides of our balance sheet, choosing general partners and asking them for a different set of metrics that includes the impact that they are having, the impact that the companies in the portfolio are having, and how that contributes to the mission of what we are trying to accomplish in our grant making, right? That all has to go together. And then the last piece, right, and just to sort of reflect on what it really means to drive change and what it means to act in partnership is to be collaborative, right? To share this story as broadly as I can, to look for like-minded partners in this arena, to look for like-minded partners in other arenas, right? That means public sector, that means private sector, right? That means other foundations, other kinds of philanthropy, right? High net worth individuals and family offices, and that we can pair up, right, and work together to really come at these problems with all the tools that are in the hands of different parts of the ecosystem. That there are different tools, different preferences, different ideas, different opportunities, but working together, we have an opportunity to shape this so that all of you, right, the entrepreneurs that are coming through Halcyon now, the entrepreneurs that are coming through Halcyon in the future will come into an environment that is different, better, easier, more diverse, right, and more committed to the combination of impact and return, which I don't fundamentally believe is a contradiction in terms or is necessarily in tension with each other. So that is my promise to you, right? So while you are out building your businesses, while you are out dreaming up the next thing, pursuing the thing that everybody has told you is a bad idea, and you just can't stop yourself from doing it, I want you to know that I am out there looking to make a little bit of a dent in this side of the system, right? Creating a new kind of limited partner, asking new sets of questions, bringing new actors to the table, and hopefully changing the system from that vantage point after having interacted with it and a whole bunch of others. So I wish you luck. I wish you well. I am here to tell you all the ins and outs. There's lots of horrible broken bones and bruises and everything else that happened on my path as an entrepreneur. I'm happy to share all of it. There has to be a beverage, so I'm not going to do it here today. it requires wine, right? I think what's the phrase? We're going to need more wine, right? So thank you very much for having me. Good luck.